Hey, welcome back. Today we're tackling one of those huge, ancient questions that people have been asking forever. Why are we even here? What's the point of this life? The material we're looking at today offers a really unique and structured take on this whole mystery, so let's dive in. So, to get started, let's look at a really foundational story, but from a totally different angle. The story of Adam and Eve, it's often painted as this big tragedy, right? The moment everything went wrong. But what if that's not the whole story? What if it wasn't a mistake at all, but a necessary step forward? And yeah, this slide really lays it all out. On one side, you have the traditional view. The fall was a total catastrophe. But the text we're digging into argues the complete opposite. It says, hold on, the fall wasn't just expected, it was an intentional, carefully planned part of a much bigger, divine project. Okay, so here's our game plan for walking through this idea. First, we're going to re-examine this whole concept of a planned fall. Then we'll get into the three core purposes of life here: getting physical bodies, experiencing a fullness of joy, and receiving the power to create. And then finally, we'll wrap it all up by seeing how this all fits into the bigger picture of life as a kind of mortal school. All right, let's jump right into section 1, a planned fall. The source presents this not so much as a radical new idea, but more like a crucial clarification for a really old and kind of confusing theological problem. So according to the source, our life here isn't just random. It's actually designed to fulfill at least 5 incredibly important purposes that are, get this, impossible to achieve any other way. We're going to focus on the first 3 of those because they really build on each other. And that brings us right to our second section and the first major reason we're on Earth: the need for physical bodies. So the text talks about this time before we were born, a premortal life where we were all spirits, and we learned, we grew, but eventually we basically hit a wall. The text says our progress was just stopped, unless we were added upon, which, just means we needed something more than what we had. Which of course brings up a pretty obvious question, right? If the whole point was to get a physical body, why not just get one there? Why go through all this trouble of coming to Earth? And the text gives a really straightforward answer. Getting bodies made of, quote, temporal matter just wasn't possible in the spirit world. It required a journey to a totally different place, this mortal world where physical bodies were, part of the deal. Okay, moving on to section 3, and you'll see how this all starts to connect. It's not just about having a body, it's about what that body lets us feel. This is the second purpose, a fullness of joy. Now, the source material has a very specific idea of what joy is here. It's not just, feeling happy for a minute. It's described as the emotional marriage of the mind and the body. It's this incredible fusion, this deep connection between our spirit and our physical self that we just couldn't experience before.
And this isn't just a modern idea, it's backed up by ancient scripture. The prophet Lehi taught that without the fall, which is what brought us into this world, we simply, quote, could not have had joy. So what that means is mortality is basically the front door to experiencing that kind of profound emotion.
And this slide here lays out the whole process perfectly. The path to a fullness of joy isn't a one-and-done thing. It's a 3-step journey. Our spirit and body come together here in life. They separate for a little while when we die, and then, and this is key, they're reunited forever in a resurrected state. So the real key here is that permanent reunion. A passage in modern scripture makes it crystal clear. It's only when our spirit and our body, what it calls element, are permanently, inseparably connected in the resurrection that we can finally get that complete, ultimate joy. And then the very next verse just doubles down on this. It says when our spirit and body are separated, like they are after we die, we literally cannot get that fullness of joy. Our spirits all by themselves just aren't capable of it. So the physical body isn't just a nice to have, it's absolutely essential for our ultimate progression. All right, this brings us to section 4, and the third purpose. And this one is huge. It's a power that, according to the text, is only available to us right here, right now, in this mortal experience. The power to create. The source describes the power to procreate not just as a biological thing, but as this divine gift, really. It's exclusive to this second estate, which is just another way of saying mortal life, and it's presented as something we were given only after we proved ourselves in our first estate before we were born. And this is where the whole idea just gets massive. The text suggests that our experience as parents here on Earth, that's actually a training ground. It's practice for what it calls parenthood in eternity, which is described as a core quality of godhood itself. And you guessed it, we're back to the Garden of Eden. That same scripture we talked about before says that if Adam and Eve hadn't gone through the fall, they never could have had children. Their immortal state actually prevented procreation. Mortality was the key that unlocked that door.
And all of this builds up to this really powerful passage from modern scripture. It declares that those who faithfully complete this mortal journey are called gods, and that, quote, all things are theirs. This is basically the ultimate potential, the final goal that this whole mortal experience unlocks.
Okay, so let's pull all these threads together in our last section, our mortal school, and just quickly go over the key takeaways from this whole framework.
So, just to recap, what we've seen is this framework with 3 huge interconnected purposes for being here. First, to get a physical body, something we couldn't do before. Second, to experience a fullness of joy, which requires that body. And third, to be given the divine power of procreation, which is our training for eternity.
And when you look at it this way, it completely reframes the whole human experience. It shifts the perspective away from life being some kind of punishment for a mistake made long ago. Instead, life becomes this intentional, totally necessary, and amazing training ground, a school designed for us to progress.
Which, of course, leaves us with one last big question to chew on. If this life really is a school, with this incredible curriculum, then what's the final exam? Thanks for sticking with me as we explored this perspective.